Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel, and today we're joined here by Nova. Welcome back to another Hometown Horrors. Today we're going to be talking about the missing Pattersons couple who may not be alive, may not live in the States anymore. We honestly don't know, but this is really an intriguing case. Before we go any further, I do want to mention two things. One, there are timestamps down below. Please use them if you want to. As always, I recommend stopping at the disclaimers and trigger warnings. Second, the pillows are messed up because Nova was back there and now she's over here. It's also the first time I've filmed at night in since November, so if the lighting's a little different, I'm sorry. So let's get into it. Hometown Horrors is a series on my channel. I grew up on true crime and have always been fascinated by why people do what they do. The whole nature versus nurture aspect. Hometown Horrors is basically where I take a true crime case based in my hometown county. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, sister city to Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. There is this insane phenomenon where basically Juarez, Mexico is one of the most dangerous cities in the world, often ranked in the top 10 on the yearly analysis list. And until 3 years ago, El Paso, Texas was ranked one of the safest cities in America, often in the top 15. That was before an outsider with an extreme hate for Hispanics came in and massacred 23 people. El Paso, Texas has yet to make it back onto the safest cities in America's list yet. No matter how safe a city may be, there are always crimes being committed. As someone who grew up in the city and knows the ins and outs, who can tell you exactly where parts of crimes have taken place and what parts of town are dangerous, I believe I have this insider knowledge, which I can help bring a certain perspective to the case. As I said, El Paso was one of the safest cities in America for years, so there'd be only so many criminal cases I'd be able to cover before I ran out. Thus, I'll also be expanding, covering cases from surrounding areas, including Juarez, Mexico, Las Cruces, New Mexico, Horizon, Texas, Chapadán, New Mexico, and other surrounding areas I've been to and am very familiar with. That way, I'm still able to give that aid and knowledge. Before we begin, I just want to give trigger warnings for possible murder, missing persons, and theories on the case. There is no concrete evidence of what actually happened to these people, but it's better safe than sorry. If any of these topics you'd be unable to handle, please stop watching, put yourself first, and I'll see you at a later date with a different video. If I get any information wrong, please kindly let me know below. I tried to get the following information as accurately as possible, however, I used multiple different sources, and if only one source mentioned something, I was unable to verify it using another source, I left that detail out completely, and went with the most commonly reported aspect of the detail. Sources will all be linked down below. I tried to only use respectable websites. If I'm looking off to the side at all, it's because I have my script loaded here. If I didn't have the script, I'd go off topic constantly. I apologize if it's any inconvenience. Lastly, this video is an informational research study that I am sharing for academic entertainment's reason only. I mean absolutely no harm to anyone mentioned, including the victim and the victim's family. So grab a blanket, a snack, a drink, and let's begin. It was March of 1957, over 66 years ago. William Pat Patterson and Maragret Patterson were a married couple. William Patterson was a Photoshop owner. Not Photoshop like we have on our phones nowadays, but photo development place where you would take Polaroid film to be developed and get your print photos back, and digital camera, that sort of thing. The couple operated the store at 113 East Main Drive, which is directly opposite of San Jacinto Plaza, a popular area in downtown El Paso. The couple were last seen on March 5th, 1957 by a friend who reported Pat was cheerful. They left for their home at 300 Paramount Drive, just a few miles away from their shop on the lower west side of El Paso. But on March 6, 1957, the following day, the couple vanished without their beloved cat. No clue was left as to why and how they disappeared. Even among their family and friends, no one knew where they went. In the preceding years, the mystery of their disappearance grew into El Paso lore. A different friend than the one on March 5th said in the early morning hours of March 6, 1957, that he had received a call from Pat telling him, and I quote, "We're going away. I'll have to take Margaret away for a while." The friend was instructed to look after the business and was told where Pat would leave his car. Now, by some reports, the Pattersons would go to Mexico monthly and also took trips all of a sudden sporadically. So them missing was not really noticed for months, which we'll get to in a bit. Keep in mind, their house to the Juarez, Mexico border to El Paso was literally 15 minutes away. 9 days later, on March 15th, 1957, a business associate received a telegram, because that's how they communicated back in those days, signed Pat, which read, and I quote, "Sorry had to leave so sudden. Sell house, trailer, and use money for business. License both cars for business." Other business instructions were given with the admonishment, and I quote, "Handle all this quietly as possible. Important. Sure you will understand." The instructions were then carried out. Later, when an investigation was started by Sheriff Jimmy Hicks, it was found that the telegram had been phoned in from a Western Union in Dallas, Texas, by a pay station. Friends who had not not heard anymore from Pat began worrying as weeks rolled on. On August 15th, 1957, one of the friends named Cecile Ward contacted the sheriff's station. A search of the Pattersons' home in Kern Place on the lower west side of El Paso began, which indicated no evidence of violence and nothing of significance was missing. No important cash withdrawals had been made from their bank account. Pat and Margaret left their wallets and her purse on their bedroom dresser. Their pet cat was found wandering the neighborhood, hungry and locked out. And the Pattersons associates had cleaned out the place and actually rented it out to someone else. However, their cat had been left unattended at the house for months. Neighbors said Margaret had been devoted to the cat and would not have left it to fend for itself. How that cat was alive for months, we don't know, and I want to know that. Investigators followed a number of blind leads until a court inquiry was called in June of 1958. Multiple witnesses were called, but they could contribute nothing towards the solution of the mystery. Sheriff R.L. Bob Bailey then traveled to Valle de Bravo in the state of Mexico to check on a reported sighting of the couple, but he was unable to confirm it. The case was running cold when Patterson's attorney produced a letter dated May 29, 1958 and postmarked Laredo, Texas. So it would be a year and 2 months after the Pattersons disappeared when this letter showed up. It was typewritten and a signature was in ink. The Department of Public Safety handwriting experts compared it with a genuine Patterson signature, found some discrepancies and some striking similarities. The letter read, and I quote, "We will not be back to El Paso, and by the time you will get this, we will be out of the country and nobody can find us." It went on with a detail of disposal of the business, operation, and other personal belongings, including cars and boats. Only someone acquainted with the business and its personal issues could have written the letter because the details in the letter were just too personal, experts claimed. Now, if Pat didn't write the letter, then who did? It was not a valid legal document because no one was there to witness when it was signed and written. A renewed search touched off by the letter proved fruitless. Several tips led to Mexico, but no concrete evidence of the whereabouts of the missing couple was ever found. Then in 1984, the sheriff's office reopened the case quietly. Detective Freddie Bonilla interviewed a man that claimed he had cleaned blood from the Pattersons' garage and saw one of the Pattersons' associates remove bloody sheets from the home. Freddie was hoping to take the case to a grand jury for an indictment, but nothing ever came of it. Then in 1989, the sheriff's office took a statement from a woman in Colorado who knew the Pattersons several years before they were reported missing. It did not advance the investigation at all. Years after they were reported missing, the Pattersons' estate was actually liquidated. Various relatives were involved in the procedure, but the question remained unanswered. What happened to the Pattersons? Soon the investigation turned into a closed case. But in the early 2000s, El Paso Sheriff Leo Samaniego reopened it. It is still open to this day. Sheriff Samaniego said he thought, without proof, that the Pattersons were spies and ran afoul of their parent organization. Now this theory gets interesting, so strap in for it. Over the years, several theories had emerged to explain what happened to the Patterson couple, such as they were kidnapped, they were met with foul play, they left everything behind to start a new life elsewhere, they were spies, or they were abducted by space aliens, or Pat killed Margaret intentionally or accidentally and left town. Vice versa on that one. And lastly, that their spirits haunt their old house at Paramount Drive. Now, for over a year, currently, the El Paso Police Department had a dedicated task force to solve the case, but nothing has come out of it. So let's get back to the spy theory. El Paso County Sheriff Leo Samaniego said the following on his theory. The way they got up and just walked away and left everything behind, the Russians or whoever sent them probably told them to drop everything and go back. Some people said they had seen the Pattersons take photographs of Fort Bliss Army Base and of military shipments on the trains that came through here. He claims, as we know, the Pattersons owned the shop downtown called Patterson's Photo Supply. So the sheriff said this about his theory and the case. It was a high-profile case, very unusual. The original theory was that they were kidnapped. There was no sign of a struggle. It's like they went out for a walk and they just never came back. In their quest to find the couple in the reopened case in 2022, El Paso officials sought help from the FBI, Los Angeles Police Department, and Mexican authorities, amongst others. El Paso FBI Special Agent Art Werg said he couldn't find any information in the agency's files that go back that far to indicate whether the Pattersons came under surveillance for suspected espionage. Associates of the Pattersons told authorities in the 1950s that the couple left to go on an extended vacation to Florida, and later that they sent word that they just weren't coming back. The El Paso authorities confirmed a raid States Court of Inquiry, also known as an inquest, to look into the couple's whereabouts, but the inquiry failed to find them. I mentioned this earlier, but let's actually get deeper into it. According to the news archives, Pat's 75-year-old father, named Luther Patterson, traveled from Chicago, Illinois to El Paso to testify at the Court of Inquiry. He said the following, and I quote, "I always knew Pat and Margaret would take off like this someday, but I figured it'd be 4 or 5 years away. They're not dead. My boy has done things like this before. He made his living doing a sleight hand of tricks." However, several years later, after failing to hear from his son, Patterson's father said he suspected that the couple was actually dead. Adding to the mystery was the fact that the Pattersons' associates told police that William Patterson had sent written instructions on how he wanted to dispose of his business and private properties. A letter signed W.D. Patterson stated that Pat wanted his properties to be distributed amongst the following people: Doyle D.G. Kirkland, a friend and a manager of the Duffy's photo supply store. Keep his name in mind. Herb Roth, his business auditor, and Art Moreno, an employee of Pat who was 24 at the time. At some point, the sheriff, Sergeant Belpack, said a signature on one of the letters that Pat allegedly sent was challenged, which really means like it wasn't his in question. Sergeant Belpack said it was unusual for Pat to leave his property to these people, considering that he had at least 2 living relatives at the time, his father and his sister. Besides the Patterson photo supply store in downtown, Pat also owned an interest in a high-end boat company, a property in Guaymas, Mexico, the house that the couple lived in on Paramount Street, a boat, and a Cadillac car. He was not a poor man by any means. They were actually doing really well for themselves, especially during the time. During the initial investigation in the 1950s, police interviewed Pat's alleged 20-year-old girlfriend named Estefana Arroyo Marfin, who lived in Juarez, Mexico, just across the border from El Paso, Texas, like I said, a 15-minute drive away from their home. Estefana said she last saw William Patterson in the early hours of March 6, 1957, and said that he told her that he had important things to tell her and that when they come for me, I'll have to go in a hurry. Sheriff Balpack said she later recanted her statement. Cecile Ward was the last person to talk to Margaret Patterson, who reportedly had a drinking problem, and was the one to report them missing 5 months later. The man I mentioned earlier, Colby Kirkland, was the last person who was at the Pattersons' house before the couple had vanished. Police said this about the man, and I quote, "Kirkland was helping Pat work on the Pattersons' boat in the garage at the house. Several sightings of the couple were reported in Mexico and the United States, but sheriff's officials said that they were never able to confirm any of them. A former homicide detective named Freddie Bonilla, who I mentioned earlier, suspects that the Pattersons were in fact killed. In 1984, when he was the sheriff's captain in El Paso, a new witness emerged who gave credence to that theory. His name was Ronaldo Negri. Freddie said this about the reopening, and I quote, "I wanted to take the case to a grand jury and get an indictment. Negri told us he found blood in the Pattersons' garage and a piece of human scalp on the propeller of the Pattersons' boat. He found a pair of jeans with a Rolex watch that belonged to Pat and said he also saw one of Pat's associates remove the bloody sheets from the home and put them inside of the trunk of a car. He did not talk to police sooner because he was actually an illegal immigrant at the time, but when he came to police at the time, Ronaldo was actually a US citizen. Ronaldo Negri died in a car accident 2 years after giving his statement to the sheriff's department. Sheriff Balpeck confirmed that Negri's statement is on file in the case. The mystery also fueled rumors that the ghosts of the Pattersons haunt their former home. Another detective in the early investigation suspected that their bodies might be buried somewhere on their property, and they just could never prove it, according to news archives. Sheriff Santiago said this in the case. "When I was a city patrolman, the house on Paramount was in my district. I could get 100 calls. All these kids would stop by the house because they thought the house was haunted, and they would scare the poor old lady that once lived there." That is all the information that is actually on this case. It is still unsolved 66 years later, and I don't think it'll ever be solved at this rate that we're going, because it's been reopened for a year and nothing has come out of it. Below, there's actually a source that has every single news article that came out in the El Paso Herald-Post newspaper about the Pattersons. It's a very interesting read because there's like 20 of them and none of it leads anywhere. So, like I said, that's all the information. This case is really fascinating because before I ever got into true crime over, 7 years ago maybe, I knew about this case and it always has been fascinating. It's definitely one that gets told around Halloween here. I don't know if you ever know about the Roanoke settlement that everyone just disappeared during the 13 colonies, but this is definitely like that situation here in El Paso. It's mind-boggling. So let me know your thoughts and opinions down below if you have any theories of your own. I really find the alien things funny because it's just so random. I would just want to know where they are. I mean, I think they probably would no longer be alive to this day, but you never know. Alright, the doggo picture of the day, as always, for a palette cleanser is this picture of Holland all napped up on the bed. She is so cute. Alright, love you, minute kisses, don't think stupid, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!